The sun was just starting to come up, painting the sky in colors of orange and pink. In a small, quiet house at the edge of town, the day was beginning for Officer Ben and his family. In the kitchen, the smell of toast was in the air. But the real heart of the home wasn't at the table. It was on the living room floor. There, a little girl was sitting in her pajamas, a book open in her lap. Her name was Lily. She was 7 years old, with hair that was always a little messy in the morning. And sitting right beside her, taking up a lot of the floor, was a big German Shepherd dog named Rex.to. Anyone else? Rex looked serious, maybe even a little scary. He was a big dog, strong and smart. He worked with Ben at the police station. He knew how to find hidden things and how to help catch people who were running. He had a job to do and he was very good at it. But here, in the soft morning light of the living room, Rex was not a police dog. He was Lily's dog. He lay perfectly still, his head resting on his paws, listening. Lily was reading a story out loud from her picture book. Her voice would sometimes stumble over a big word, and she would sound it out slowly. And the brave dragon, dead, decided to share his treasure, she read, her small finger following the words. Rex let out a soft sigh, his tail giving a single quiet thump against the carpet. He wasn't judging her reading. He was just happy to be there. Ben watched them from the doorway, a coffee cup warm in his hands. This was his favorite sight in the whole world. It was the peace he carried with him when his job got hard. "Time for school, kiddo," Ben said, his voice gentle. Lily closed her book carefully. "Okay, Daddy." Rex listened to the whole chapter. He liked the part about the dragon's friend. Ben smiled. "I'm sure he did." Lily wrapped her arms around Rex's neck in a big hug, burying her face in his fur. Rex didn't move a muscle. He just closed his eyes, accepting the love. "Bye, Rex. Be a good boy for Daddy at work," she whispered. A little while later, Ben was in his uniform, the dark fabric neat and pressed. Rex stood beside him, a different dog altogether. His playful, soft look was gone. His posture was straight, his eyes alert and focused. He wore a special collar and harness for work. He was ready. "Let's go, partner," Ben said, clicking his tongue. They walked out to the police car, a team. People in their neighborhood knew them. They would see Ben the officer and Rex the police dog, but they would also see Ben the dad, and Rex the gentle giant who let a little girl put silly stickers on his water bowl. Their day at work was normal. They drove around the town. Rex sat perfectly in the back of the special car, looking out the window. They stopped to help a woman who had locked her keys in her car. They drove through the park, just letting people see them, which made everyone feel a little safer. In the afternoon, Ben got a call. There was a big truck stopped by the side of the highway. The other officers thought the driver might be hiding something. Ben parked a distance away. "All right, Rex. Time to work." Ben opened the door, and Rex jumped out, not jumping for fun, but with a purpose. His nose went to the ground, then to the air. Ben gave him the command to search. Rex moved around the truck, sniffing carefully at the doors, the wheels, the big container on the back. His walk was all business. He was looking for a specific smell, the hidden smell of things that shouldn't be there. He went past the front, then to the back. Suddenly, he stopped. His whole body went stiff. He sat down right next to the back bumper and looked straight at Ben. He didn't bark. He didn't move. Just a solid, silent sit. "This is it," Ben said to the other officers. "He's got a hit. He's telling us there's something here." Turned out Rex was right. There were boxes of illegal fireworks hidden in a secret compartment. It wasn't a huge crime, but it was a job well done. Ben rubbed Rex's head roughly, a proud smile on his face. "Good boy, Rex. What a good boy." Rex's tail wagged hard, but he stayed sitting until Ben told him it was okay to relax. He knew the rules. When their shift ended, the serious police dog faded away again. On the drive home, Rex would whine softly when they turned onto their street. He knew where he was going. As soon as Ben opened the car door at home, Rex would leap out and run to the front door, waiting impatiently, his body wiggling. The door would open, and there was Lily. She would come running out, still in her school clothes. "Rex, you're home." She would throw her arms around him, and he would lick her face, his tail wagging so fast it was a blur. All his discipline from the day was gone. He was just a happy dog who missed his friend. After dinner, Lily would do her homework at the table. Rex would lie under it, right on top of her feet, like a warm, heavy blanket. Sometimes, she would sneak him a tiny piece of her apple when her dad wasn't looking. He would take it so gently from her fingers she could barely feel it. Later, Ben would read Lily a bedtime story in her room, which was painted a light, cheerful yellow. Rex would always come in and lie on the round rug next to her bed. He wouldn't get on the bed unless invited, but he always wanted to be close. When the story was finished and the lights were turned down low, Lily would lean over the side of her bed. "Good night, Rex. I love you." In the dark, Ben would see Rex's tail tap softly twice on the rug. Thump, thump. It was their routine. It was their life. It was simple and it was perfect. Ben would look at his daughter and his dog, his whole world in one small room, and feel a peace so deep it felt like it would last forever. He didn't know then how fragile that peace could be. He didn't know that the most important alert of Rex's life would not be for hidden fireworks or drugs, but for a silent, invisible danger that had already found its way into his happy, sunny home. It started on a Wednesday. The day felt ordinary just like any other. The morning routine was the same. The smell of toast, Lily reading to Rex on the living room floor, the quiet hustle of getting ready for the day. But when Ben went to wake Lily up for school, she was still curled under her blankets. "Hey, sleepyhead," he said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Time to rise and shine." Lily opened her eyes, but they seemed heavy. "My head hurts, Daddy," she mumbled, her voice small. Ben felt her forehead. It was warm, too warm. A flicker of worry sparked in his chest, but he pushed it down. Kids get sick. It happens. It was probably just a little bug going around her school. "Okay, no school today," he said, trying to sound cheerful. "You get to have a pajama day with Rex." Rex, who had followed him into the room, pushed his nose gently against Lily's hand where it lay on the blanket. She gave him a weak little smile but didn't sit up. Ben called in sick for himself, too. His sergeant understood. "Take care of your girl, Ben. We'll see you when she's better." The day drifted by, slow and quiet. Lily lay on the couch, wrapped in her favorite blanket. Rex didn't leave his post. He lay on the floor right beside her, his head on his paws, his eyes watching her every breath. He didn't try to play. He just stayed close, a silent, furry guardian. Ben gave her some medicine for the fever and made her soup, the kind her grandma used to make. She only ate a few spoonfuls. "I'm just tired," she said, and closed her eyes again. Why that evening, the warm forehead had become a burning fever. Her headache was worse. She started to feel sick to her stomach. The ordinary bug theory was crumbling fast in Ben's mind, replaced by a cold, growing fear. This was moving too quickly. He called the doctor's after-hours line. The voice on the phone listened and told him, "With a fever that high, you should take her to the emergency room. Better to be safe." The words "emergency room" made Ben's heart feel like a stone in his chest. He moved quickly, gathering her blanket, her stuffed rabbit. "We're going to see the doctor, sweetie, just to make sure everything's okay." Lily was too weak to argue. She let him pick her up. As he carried her to the car, Rex followed them right to the front door. He stood in the doorway, his body tense, confused. He wasn't coming. His girl was leaving and he couldn't follow. He let out a soft, worried whine. "Stay, Rex. Guard the house," Ben said, his voice tight. "Good boy." The hospital was a world of bright lights and beeping sounds and smells that were all wrong. It was the opposite of their quiet, sunlit home. Doctors and nurses moved around Lily, asking questions, taking her temperature, drawing a small vial of blood. Lily cried, scared of the needle, and Ben held her hand, feeling completely helpless. "It could be a number of things," the doctor said, her face kind but serious. "A severe flu, maybe. We'll run some tests and get some fluids into her. You're doing the right thing by bringing her in." They gave Lily medicine to bring the fever down and put her in a room. She fell into a fitful sleep, her small hand still in Ben's. He sat in the hard plastic chair beside her bed, watching the rise and fall of her chest under the hospital blanket. He called his wife, Lily's mom, who lived a few hours away. Her voice cracked with fear over the phone. "I'm leaving now. I'm on my way." The night was long. The tests came back, but they didn't show a clear answer. "Her white blood cell count is very high," the doctor explained. "Her body is fighting a serious infection. We're starting broad-spectrum antibiotics to cover the possibilities." Possibilities. The word hung in the air. Ben hated it. He wanted answers, not possibilities. He went home briefly in the early morning to shower and check on Rex. The house was eerily silent. Rex met him at the door, not with a wagging tail, but with a searching look. He sniffed Ben all over, especially his hands and clothes, looking for Lily's scent. He followed Ben to her empty room and stood in the middle of it, lost. "She's coming home soon, boy," Ben said, trying to believe it himself. He filled Rex's bowl with food, but the dog just looked at it and walked away. Back at the hospital, things had changed. Lily was awake, but she wasn't herself. She seemed confused, her eyes not quite focusing. She complained that the light was too bright, that her neck hurt. A new, deeper alarm shot through Ben. He called the nurse. What happened next was a blur of controlled panic. More doctors came in. Their calm masks slipped slightly, and Ben saw the urgency in their eyes. They spoke in quick, technical terms to each other: nuchal rigidity, photophobia. They mentioned a word that turned Ben's blood to ice. Meningitis. A new, more intense set of tests was ordered. They needed to do a spinal tap, they explained, to know for sure. Ben had to hold his daughter's hand while they did the procedure, telling her it would be okay, that she was so brave, while inside he was breaking into a million pieces. The wait for the results was the worst time of Ben's life. He paced the small, sanitized room. He held Lily's hand as she drifted in and out of sleep. He prayed to a God he hadn't talked to in years. He made promises. Just let her be okay. Take anything from me, just let her be okay. The doctor came in, her face grave. She didn't need to say much. Ben saw the truth in her eyes before she spoke. "It's bacterial meningitis, Ben. It's a very aggressive strain. We've switched her to the strongest antibiotics we have, but it progressed so quickly. Her little body is struggling to fight it." Ben felt the room tilt. "What does that mean? What are you saying?" "We are doing everything we can, but you need to prepare yourself. The next 24 hours are critical." Ben collapsed back into the chair. The world narrowed to the sound of the machines keeping his daughter alive. He watched her, this vibrant, laughing girl who read stories to her dog, now so still and small in the big hospital bed. He talked to her, telling her about Rex, about how they would go to the park when she got better, about the new book he'd bought for her. But Lily didn't get better. The infection was a fire that raged faster than the medicine could pour water on it. It caused swelling, terrible swelling where it couldn't be stopped. In the end, it wasn't in the critical 24 hours. It was only a few hours later. Her small heart, overwhelmed by the battle inside her, just stopped. The doctors and nurses tried. They rushed in. They worked on her with a fierce and desperate energy. But Ben, standing frozen against the wall, knew. He saw the moment the fight left the room. He saw the flat, endless line on the monitor where her heartbeat had been. His little girl was gone. The sound that came out of him then wasn't a cry. It was something raw and broken, a sound from a place so deep inside it had no name. He sank to the floor, the strength gone from his legs. The world didn't just end with a bang. It ended with the soft, steady beep of a machine and a silence so complete it swallowed him whole. He had to make calls. To his ex-wife, who was still on the road. Her scream over the phone would haunt him forever. To his parents. To his sergeant. His voice was a flat, dead thing, just repeating the awful facts. He signed papers he didn't read. Walking out of that hospital into the blinding, ordinary afternoon sun felt wrong. How could the sun still be shining? How could people be driving their cars, going to the store, living their lives? His life was over. It was right back there in that cold, white room that he drove home on autopilot, his eyes seeing nothing of the road. When he pulled into his driveway, the house looked the same. The flowers by the porch, the bike lying in the grass. It was a picture of a life that no longer existed. He opened the front door. Rex was there, waiting as always. The dog's whole body was eager, his tail starting to wag, his nose ready to find Lily on Ben. He sniffed the air, then Ben's empty hands, his pants, his shirt. He found no Lily scent. Only the sterile, bitter smell of hospital and grief. Rex's tail slowed. It dropped, then hung completely still. He looked up at Ben's face, and dogs know. They understand grief in a way words can't describe. Ben didn't have to say anything. He just fell to his knees in the hallway, and a new wave of sobs shook him. Rex didn't bark. He didn't whine. He walked forward slowly and pressed his large, warm head hard into Ben's chest. He stayed there, bearing the weight of his partner's broken heart, as the silent house echoed with a loss that was too big to hold. The guardian had lost what he was meant to guard, and now, together in the dark hallway, man and dog began their long, unbearable wait for a dawn that would never bring her back. The days that followed were not really days at all. They were just long stretches of gray light and longer stretches of dark, all of them empty. For Ben, the routine of life was shattered. There was no more making school lunches, no more frantic searches for a missing shoe in the morning, no more silly bedtime stories. The silence in the house was a physical thing. It sat in the chairs, it filled the hallways, it was heavy and thick and made it hard to breathe. Ben moved through it like a ghost. He would wake up and for one blessed second, forget. Then the truth would crash over him again. A wave of pain so fresh it felt brand new. He'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how a heart could keep beating when it felt so completely broken. Rex was grieving too, in his own silent way. He stopped eating his food. Ben would put the kibble in the bowl, the same kind he'd always loved, and Rex would just look at it, then walk away to lie down in the hallway, facing Lily's closed bedroom door. He'd lie there for hours, his nose pointed at the crack under the door, as if waiting for it to open. Sometimes he would let out a low, soft whine, a sound so full of longing it would cut right through Ben. Ben's police family tried to help. His sergeant came over with bags of food that would eventually go bad in the refrigerator. Other officers stopped by, clapping him awkwardly on the shoulder, saying things like, "If you need anything." But there was only one thing he needed, and it was the one thing no one could give him. Their words were kind, but they floated around him, not quite reaching the man trapped inside the grief. He couldn't bring himself to go into Lily's room. The door stayed shut. It held the last traces of her life, the yellow walls, the storybooks on the shelf, the small shoes lined up neatly by the bed. It was a museum of a happiness he could no longer touch. Rex seemed to understand this was a sacred space. He never scratched at the door or barked to be let in. He just kept his vigil outside it. The only time Rex would leave his post was to follow Ben. If Ben went to the kitchen, Rex would get up wearily and trail behind him, then lie down on the kitchen floor with a sigh. He wasn't seeking attention. He was making sure his other person, his partner, was still there. He was on duty again, but this was a sad, hopeless kind of duty, the duty of keeping watch over a broken man. One afternoon, Ben finally had to do it. He had to start planning the funeral. Sitting at the kitchen table with a notepad, the simple act of writing the words "service for Lily" made his hands shake. How do you fit a whole, beautiful little life into a 1-hour service? What songs do you play? What do you say? As he sat there, lost in this terrible task, Rex came and lay down beside his chair. The dog rested his head on Ben's foot, a solid, warm weight. Ben reached down, his fingers sinking into the thick fur of Rex's neck. He didn't cry. He was too empty for tears. He just sat there, one hand on his dog, the other on the notepad, staring at a future he didn't want. The day of the funeral arrived. It was a cool, cloudy day, the sky the color of wool. Ben put on his best dress uniform, felt stiff and strange. He clipped a clean, black leash onto Rex's collar. "You have to come today, buddy," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "She'd want you there." Rex seemed to sense the importance. He stood still and allowed Ben to brush his coat until it shone. He didn't resist when Ben led him to the car. He jumped into the back seat and sat looking out the window, as he had on 1,000 patrols, but his energy was different. There was no eager alertness. There was only a quiet solemnity. The small church was full of people. There were family, friends, teachers from Lily's school, and rows of Ben's fellow officers in their blue uniforms. It was a sea of sad faces. Ben sat in the front row, Rex lying obediently at his feet. He heard the words the pastor said, words about angels and heaven and a love that never ends, but they felt far away, like a radio playing in another room. All he could see was the small, white coffin at the front, surrounded by flowers. It looked too tiny to hold his world. After the service, everyone drove to the cemetery on the hill overlooking the town. The grass was green and neatly trimmed. A little tent was set up over the open earth, and chairs were lined up for the family. Ben stood with his parents, his ex-wife weeping quietly beside him. Rex stayed close to Ben's leg, his body pressed against him. The pastor said a few final words. A soft, sad song played from a small speaker. Ben's mind was numb. He was just trying to get through the next minute and then the next. Then, it was time. People began to slowly step back, to turn away, to head towards their cars. The final part was over. But as Ben took a half step back, he felt the leash go tight. He looked down. Rex was not moving. The dog was staring intently at the white coffin, which now rested on the straps above the ground. His ears were pitched forward. His nostrils flared, taking in deep, deliberate sniffs of the air. "Come on, Rex," Ben whispered gently, giving a soft tug on the leash. Rex didn't budge. He let out a low grumble, a sound deep in his chest. It wasn't a growl of anger. It was a sound of profound protest. "Rex, heel," Ben said, using his firm officer voice. But Rex was no longer following police commands. He was following a deeper instinct. He took 2 steps forward, pulling the leash from Ben's loosened grip. He walked right up to the edge of that open earth. He sniffed again, a long, hard sniff directed right at the coffin. Then, with a heartbreakingly gentle movement, he lay down in the soft grass, his body parallel to the coffin. He rested his chin on the ground, his nose pointing straight at it, and he let out one long, shuddering sigh. A murmur went through the few people who remained. Ben's sergeant, a tall man with a kind face, came over. "Ben, it's okay. He's just saying goodbye." Ben stared at his dog. He saw the absolute focus in Rex's posture. The dog's whole being was fixed on that coffin. He wasn't lying there in sad remembrance. He was working. His body was rigid with concentration, the same way it got when he was tracking a scent or had found something hidden. A memory flashed in Ben's mind, sharp and clear. Rex sitting perfectly still by the back of that truck on the highway. The silent, solid sit that meant, "I have found it. It is here." A cold finger of something that was not quite grief, but darker and more confusing, touched Ben's spine. This wasn't just loyalty. This was an alert. He walked over and knelt beside his dog. He put his hand on Rex's back. He could feel the tension in the muscles. Rex didn't turn to lick his hand. He didn't acknowledge Ben at all. His entire world had narrowed to the scent coming from his little girl's coffin. "What is it, boy?" Ben whispered, his voice barely audible. "What do you smell?" Rex just whined softly, a high-pitched, urgent sound he only made on the job when he was sure of something but couldn't get to it. Ben looked up. He met the eyes of his sergeant over the coffin. He saw the same terrible, dawning thought reflected there. The sergeant gave a slow, almost imperceptible shake of his head, as if to say, "Don't go there. It's too awful." But Ben was already there. The grief in his heart cracked open, and a frightening, icy clarity poured in. His dog, his brilliant, trained partner, was telling him that something was wrong. Something was with Lily. Not a memory, not a spirit, something real. something his nose could detect in the still air of a graveyard. The love of a dog had brought him to this moment of pure sorrow. But the training of a dog was now pointing a silent, accusing paw at a truth too terrible to ignore. The vigil at the graveside was not an end. It was the beginning of a whole new nightmare. Ben stood up, the world tilting on its axis once more. He looked from his loyal, distressed dog to the kind, worried face of his boss. "We can't leave," Ben heard himself say, his voice suddenly firm, the voice of an officer, not a grieving father. "Call the medical examiner. Right now. We're not leaving her here. Not yet." The air under the cemetery tent, already heavy with grief, suddenly crackled with a new, terrible tension. The few family members and officers still standing there froze. Ben's words hung in the quiet, "Call the medical examiner," and their meaning was like a splash of ice water. Ben's ex-wife looked at him, her eyes wide with fresh horror. "Ben, what are you saying? No, please no more. Let her rest." Her voice was a plea, breaking under the weight of this new shock. Ben went to her, taking her hands in his. They were cold. "I don't know what I'm saying," he whispered, his own voice ragged. "But look at him." He pointed to Rex, who hadn't moved a muscle from his spot beside the coffin. The dog's intense focus was a physical thing. "He's not just sad. He's telling us something. You know how he is when he finds something. This is that. Exactly that." He turned to his sergeant, whose face was pale and serious. The sergeant, a man who had trusted Rex's nose on 100 cases, gave a slow, grim nod. He pulled out his phone and walked a few steps away, speaking in low, urgent tones. What followed was a blur of quiet, professional dread. The funeral director was spoken to, his own face a mask of solemn confusion and then dawning understanding. The family was gently, painfully, led away from the graveside to their cars. Ben's parents held onto his ex-wife, who was sobbing now from a place of utter confusion and renewed agony. "Why is this happening?" she kept asking. No one had an answer. Ben stayed. He couldn't leave. He stood a few feet back, the leash now loose in his hand, the other end still attached to Rex, who refused to budge. He watched as the funeral home workers, with immense care and changed expressions, reversed the process that had just happened. The flowers were moved. The straps were readjusted. The small white coffin was lifted back up from the earth that had almost claimed it and placed carefully into the black vehicle that had brought it. Rex finally moved then. He stood up, his eyes never leaving the coffin. He followed it to the car, his nose in the air, tracking it. Ben had to lead him to his own police car. Rex jumped in, but instead of lying down, he sat upright in the back seat, panting softly, watching the black vehicle pull away. They didn't go home. They drove to the county medical examiner's office, a plain, brick building Ben had been to only for official police business. He never imagined he would come here for this. His sergeant met him there, along with a detective from the Crimes Against Persons unit. Their faces were all grave, respectful, but the switch in their minds had been flipped. This was no longer just a tragedy. It was a potential investigation. The medical examiner was an older, kind-faced woman. She spoke to Ben with a deep, genuine sympathy. "Officer, I am so very sorry for your loss. We will be as quick and as respectful as humanly possible. We understand the unusual circumstances." That's what they called it. An unusual circumstance. A dog's alert at a graveside. Ben had to sign more papers. They felt like betrayals. He was giving permission for his little girl's body to be examined again. The thought made him sick. He stepped outside for air, leaving Rex in the care of his sergeant. The dog was agitated, pacing in the hallway, whining. The wait was a different kind of hell. The first wait, at the hospital, had been filled with desperate hope. This wait was filled with a gnawing, awful dread. What if Rex was wrong? What if the grief had just broken the dog's mind, the way it had broken his own? He would have put his family through this fresh torment for nothing. He would have violated his daughter's peace for a dog's confusion. But then he would see Rex's face in his mind. That absolute, trained certainty. The same look he'd had at the truck at the warehouse last year, at the suitcase in the bus station. Rex wasn't confused. Rex knew. Hours passed. The sky darkened. Ben sat on a hard plastic chair in a sterile waiting room, his head in his hands. His sergeant brought him bad coffee. The detective made phone calls in a low voice, starting the slow process of looking at anything out of the ordinary from the days before Lily got sick. Finally, the door to the examination area opened. The medical examiner came out. She had taken off her lab coat. Her kind face was now etched with something else, a sharp, professional severity. She looked at Ben, then at the sergeant and the detective. "You were right to be concerned," she said quietly. Her words sent a chill through the room. "The initial cause of death is still meningitis. That's what took her. But it's not the whole story." Ben stood up, his legs unsteady. "What does that mean?" "It means her body shows signs of a toxic agent," the examiner said, choosing her words with precision. "Something that would have severely weakened her system, made her vulnerable to an infection that a healthy child might have been able to fight. It's a subtle substance, not something routine toxicology would have caught in the initial rush at the hospital. They were looking for the cause of the acute illness, not for an underlying poison." The word landed in the silent room like a bomb. Poison. Ben felt the floor sway beneath him. His sergeant grabbed his arm, steadying him. "Poison?" Ben echoed, the word tasting like iron in his mouth. "We've taken tissue samples, sent them for the most specific tests we can run. It will take a little time to identify the exact agent," the examiner said. "But its presence is there. Your dog, he must have an incredible nose, to have caught a scent of the metabolic byproducts through the coffin. It's extraordinary." She said it with a sort of awe, but the awe was buried under the horrific truth. The detective stepped forward, his notebook out. His gentle tone was gone, replaced by a focused calm. "Ben, we need to retrace everything. Everything Lily ate, drank, touched in the days before she got sick. We need to think about anyone who had access. Anyone who might have wanted to hurt her or hurt you." The thought was unthinkable. Who would hurt a little girl? To get to him? His mind was a storm, a whirlwind of images and faces. He was a police officer. He had put people away. Was this revenge? His thoughts spun wildly, landing on nothing and everything at once. Then, a specific memory surfaced, clear and ordinary, from the Saturday before Lily got sick. They had been playing in the front yard. The mail had come. Along with the bills and flyers, there had been a small, plain white box with no return address. Inside, on a bed of crumpled tissue paper, were 6 perfectly iced sugar cookies. A little card was tucked beside them, handwritten in neat letters. "To the neighborhood's finest. A thank you for your service. A friend.it." had seemed nice. A little odd, but nice. Lily's eyes had lit up. "Cookies," she had said. Ben, trained to be cautious, had almost taken them away. "We don't know who these are from, sweetheart. But they look yummy," she had pleaded. And he, wanting to see her smile, had relented. "Okay, just one. After dinner." He had eaten one too. They were sweet, a little floral tasting, but good. He'd felt fine. Lily had eaten her cookie with a glass of milk, grinning with a white mustache. She had been fine that night, full of energy. He told the detective all of this, the words tumbling out. The detective's eyes were sharp. "Do you still have the box?" "The card." Ben's heart sank. "The trash." "It went out on Monday morning. The day she went to the hospital." The ordinary act of taking out the trash now felt like a catastrophic mistake. "And the cookies?" "There were 4 left. We probably threw them out too." He put his head in his hands again. "I ate one. I felt fine. How could I be fine and she?" The medical examiner spoke softly. "Children's bodies are smaller, more sensitive. A dose that might only make an adult mildly unwell could overwhelm a child. And if the toxin was something that compromised her immune system quietly, it would have left her a sitting duck for the first serious bug that came along." The pieces were falling into a picture too monstrous to look at. It wasn't a direct, fast-acting poison. It was something sneakier, slower, disguised as a gift. A gift that had sickened his child just enough for a common bacteria to become a killer. The detective was already moving. "We're getting a warrant for your trash company. We'll try to find that landfill, see if we can locate your bin. It's a long shot, but we have to try. In the meantime, we need to talk to your neighbors. Anyone who might have seen something." Ben felt hollowed out, filled with a new, fiery agony. This wasn't just a tragedy anymore. It was a crime. His little girl hadn't just been stolen by a random illness. She had been taken. The grief was now mixed with a rage so vast and dark it terrified him that he walked back into the hallway. Rex was lying down now, exhausted. He lifted his head when Ben approached. Ben knelt down, looking into the dog's deep, knowing eyes. He threw his arms around the animal's neck, burying his face in the fur. "You found it," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You tried to tell us. You tried to tell me at the house, didn't you? You smelled it on her." Rex licked the side of Ben's face, a slow, comforting swipe of the tongue. The dog had done his job. He had found the hidden thing, the thing that didn't belong. He had led them to the truth, no matter how awful it was. Now, it was the turn of the human officers. They had to find the hand that baked the cookies, the mind that thought such an evil, cowardly thought. And Ben knew, with a cold certainty, that his own job was not over. He would help them hunt. For Lily, the world did not slow down for Ben's new grief, the one laced with poison and rage. It snapped into a harsh, focused clarity. The quiet house was no longer a tomb. It became a command center. The detective and his team moved in, their voices low and serious, their notepads open. They brought a gentle energy that was all business, and for Ben, that was a lifeline. It gave him something to do other than drown. The first thing they did was retrace Lily's last healthy days with a fine-tooth comb. They walked through the park route. They visited the school, talking to her teacher and the other kids. They checked the local grocery store, the ice cream shop. Every place was a dead end. No one had seen anything strange. No strangers lurking. It was all perfectly normal. The hope of finding the cookie box in the landfill vanished quickly. The trash from that week had already been buried under tons of new garbage. That evidence was gone forever. But the medical examiner's more detailed report came in. It identified the toxin. It was a compound found in the seeds of a specific, beautiful flowering plant, one often grown in gardens. It wasn't common knowledge. You'd have to really look for it or really know your plants. The examiner explained that in a small, concentrated dose, it wouldn't cause vomiting or sharp pain. It would quietly attack the body's defenses, like a soldier cutting the wires to a fortress's walls before an attack. It was the perfect coward's weapon. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing, the lead detective told Ben. They were sitting at Ben's kitchen table, Rex lying under it, as usual. This was thought out, researched. They knew what they were doing would be hard to trace, and it would look like a tragic illness. If it wasn't for Rex, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The knowledge settled on Ben like a lead blanket. Someone had studied. Someone had planned. Someone had watched their house, known their routines, and decided that hurting a little girl was the way to get to him. The why was the next puzzle. Ben and the detectives made lists. He went through every case he'd worked on in the last 5 years. Every person he'd arrested. Every angry face he'd seen in court. They prioritized the ones who had made threats, the ones with a known taste for cruelty. But it was a long list, and it felt like searching for a specific needle in a stack of other, similar needles. A week after the funeral, Ben was in the backyard, cleaning out the small shed. It was mindless work, the kind that kept his hands busy so his mind wouldn't spiral. Rex was outside with him, sniffing along the fence line. It was a cool afternoon, and Ben's neighbor from the house to the right was in his own yard, tending to a magnificent flower garden. This neighbor was a quiet, retired man who kept to himself. He loved his plants. He'd lived there for years, longer than Ben. They were friendly in that way neighbors are. They'd wave, sometimes chat about the weather or the need to trim the shared hedge. The neighbor looked over and gave Ben a sad, sympathetic smile. "How you holding up, officer?" he called out. His voice was always soft. "Taking it one day at a time," Ben answered, which was the only answer he had. "A terrible thing," the neighbor said, shaking his head. He bent back over his flower bed, carefully pruning a plant with vivid purple and white blossoms. Ben went back to sweeping the shed floor. But something felt off. A tiny alarm, quiet but persistent, had gone off in his head. He paused, leaning on the broom. He replayed the neighbor's words. They were normal. The smile was normal. But the timing. The neighbor had been away visiting family the week Lily got sick. Ben remembered because he'd been asked to keep an eye on the house, collect the mail. The neighbor had returned the day after Lily passed away. He had been gone. He had a perfect garden. He knew plants. Ben's blood seemed to slow in his veins. He looked at Rex. The dog was now standing at the fence line, not far from where the neighbor worked. Rex wasn't barking. He was standing utterly still, his nose pressed against the wooden slats of the fence, his body rigid. He was staring intently at the neighbor's back. The posture was unmistakable. It was a point. All the air left Ben's lungs. Couldn't be. This was the man who had brought over a pie when Ben first moved in. The man who always complimented Lily's drawings taped in the front window. But Rex was pointing. And Rex only pointed at one thing. The source of a scent he was trained to find. Ben acted on pure, trained instinct. He forced his face to stay calm. He gave no sign. He simply called out, "Rex, come here, boy." Rex ignored him. He never ignored a recall command. The dog let out a low, rumbling growl, deep in his chest. It was a sound Ben had only heard on the job, when a suspect was cornered. The neighbor heard it. He turned around, his pruning shears in his hand. He saw Rex, fixed on him, growling. He saw Ben, watching. For a fraction of a second, the friendly mask on the neighbor's face slipped. Ben saw something else. A flash of cold surprise, then a sharp, calculating fear. It was all Ben needed to see. "Everything okay?" the neighbor asked, his voice still soft, but now a little tight. "I'm not sure," Ben said, his own voice flat. He walked slowly toward the fence, his heart hammering against his ribs. He put a hand on Rex's head. The dog was vibrating with tension. "He's never done this before. It's like he smells something on you." The neighbor took a small step back. He tried to laugh, but it came out dry and brittle. "Probably just the fertilizer I'm using. Strong stuff." "Maybe," Ben said, not breaking eye contact. "What kind of flowers are those?" "The purple and white ones. They're beautiful." The neighbor's eyes flicked to the plant he'd just been pruning. "Oh, those? That's monkshood, also called wolfsbane. It's a classic. Poisonous, of course, but so pretty. You have to handle it with care." He said it easily, a gardener sharing his knowledge. Monkshood. The name rang in Ben's mind like a bell. He didn't know plants, but he'd heard that word recently. In the medical examiner's report. It was one of the common names for the very plant the toxin had come from. Time seemed to stop. The backyard, the shed, the buzzing of a lone bee. It all faded away. There was only the fence, the beautiful deadly flowers, the nervous man holding sharp shears, and the dog whose nose had never once been wrong. Ben made a decision. He didn't confront him. He didn't accuse him. He gave the neighbor a small, tight nod. "Well, I'll let you get back to it. Come on, Rex." He pulled firmly on Rex's collar. This time, the dog relented, but he kept his head turned, his eyes locked on the neighbor until they were inside the house. The moment the door closed, Ben was on the phone to the detective. His words were fast and quiet. "It's my neighbor, the quiet one with the garden. Rex just alerted on him. He's growing monkshood. He was gone when the cookies were delivered. I need you here. Now." The police moved with silent, swift efficiency. Within an hour, they had a warrant. They didn't come with sirens. They came in plain clothes and unmarked cars. Ben watched from his living room window, Rex beside him. As they knocked on the neighbor's door, he saw the door open. He saw the neighbor's shoulders slump, as if a great weight had finally been placed on them. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He just stepped aside and let the detectives in. The search of his house and his gardening shed found what they needed. In a locked toolbox at the back of the shed, they found a notebook. In it, in precise handwriting, were notes about the toxic properties of monkshood seeds, recipes for extraction, and on one page, a trial run of a cookie recipe, with notes on the ideal dosage for a small body to avoid immediate detection. They also found a small and used stack of plain white boxes, identical to the one the cookies had come in, and a pen that matched the handwriting on the card. The Y was in the notebook, too. Buried in the back were old, angry journal entries. They were about a parking ticket from over 2 years ago. Ben had written the man a ticket for parking his old camper van in front of his own house for too long, against a city ordinance. The neighbor had pleaded, but Ben, doing his job by the book, hadn't budged. The fine had been small, but the humiliation, the sense of being disrespected by the new cop on the block, had festered in the man's mind for years, twisting into a deep, silent hatred. The plan for revenge had formed slowly, nurtured in the quiet solitude of his garden. The arrest was quiet. They led the neighbor out in handcuffs. He didn't look at Ben's house. He just stared at the ground. Ben stood on his front porch watching the car pull away. The detective came over, his face weary. "We'll get a full confession. With what we found, he doesn't have a leg to stand on. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison." Ben just nodded. There was no victory in it. No satisfaction. The man was caught, but Lily was still gone. The hole in the world was still there. He went back inside. The house was so silent. He walked into the living room and sat down on the floor, right in the spot where Lily used to read to Rex. He felt empty, scraped clean by a storm of too many emotions. Rex came over. He looked at Ben for a long moment. Then he lay down beside him. Not as a police dog on duty. Not as a mournful guardian. He lay down as a friend. He rested his big head in Ben's lap with a heavy, trusting sigh. Ben's hands found their way to the dog's fur. He sat there in the gathering dark, petting his dog. The tears finally came then, not the raging sobs of fresh grief, but a quiet, endless stream of sorrow for all that was lost, and for the terrible, twisted way the truth had been found. Rex had done his job. He had finished the hunt. He had given them the answer. But as Ben sat there, he understood that the dog had given him something else, too. In that final, loyal alert, Rex had given Ben a purpose through the pain. He had given him a truth to fight for, even if it was an awful one. And now, in the quiet aftermath, he was giving him the one thing left in the world that still held a piece of Lily's love. His steady, silent presence. The story would be in the news. They would call Rex a hero. They would talk about the shocking truth. But here, in the quiet house, there was no headline. There was just a broken man and the dog who had led him through the darkest valley anyone could ever walk. They had a long road ahead, a road with no happy ending. But they would not walk it alone.